Kurt isn't like your average Atelier Meister. He has the skills to turn over entire kingdoms, but his obliviousness to his abilities makes you wonder if he got dropped on his head as a kid. After being left with nothing, Kurt begins job hunting, where he runs into Ulyssia. Ulyssia quickly notices Kurt's impressive abilities, but Kurt remains as thick as a brick towards it. Follow his journey to see what it'll take for him to finally realize he's a cut above the rest. After a Fenrir, an S-rank monster capable of destroying a major city all on its own, started constantly attacking a village. The distressed village people hired the Flaming Dragon Fang party to take care of it. The party's swift ranger, Bandana, swiftly immobilizes the Fenrir. She gets hurt in the process, but that's of no concern, as the party's priestess, Marlefis, quickly heals her back to full strength, allowing her to finish her job. Now with the monster held in place, their team's leader and flaming swordsman Golnova swings his mighty flaming sword on the Fenrir, finally bringing an end to its tyranny. As a result of this, their party becomes known as a party of heroes. Kurt, a young, frail boy, was also a part of this party. His role as a plain chore handler didn't make him stand out, but he still was happy to be a part of a team saving the world. Although that all changes the same night when Golnova tells Kurt that they were kicking him off their party because he was so useless. Since the rule was that no party could have more than 4 members, Kurt was stopping them from recruiting someone who could actually be useful to their party. Kurt pleads with Golnova to reconsider and give him another chance, but his pretentious party members have already made their decision, and Golnova kicks poor Kurt in the stomach, knocking him out. With nowhere left to go and no money, Kurt heads over to the Hello workstation to look for work. There he is met by a very cheerful attendant named Kershel. She asks Kurt if he was there for work or to hire. Kurt answers the former, and she quickly gets on it. She starts by asking Kurt to introduce himself a little. Kurt Rockens, 15 years old, hailed from the Haste village in the Sheen Mountains. As far as work experience was concerned, the mention of his former party, even though he only did chores there, immediately shocks Kershel, as Flaming Dragon Fang had just recently attained an SS rank. She cheers up Kurt, who was down after knowing his party got promoted the same day he got fired, by telling him it would embellish his resume quite a bit. She then asks Kurt to take an aptitude test, a test where you can uncover hidden talents of yours. Aptitude ranged from the lowest G rank to the highest SSS rank and can make a big difference in performance of the same task with the same equipment. Kurt's excitement in finding out if he had any hidden talents soon gets crushed after getting a G rank in every combat category. With him being basically useless in most work, the kind interviewer tries cheering him up by telling him he could still have aptitude in trade work. However, the technician responsible for it wouldn't be back for a week. This posed a problem for Kurt, who was short on money. Hearing his predicament, she asks him to go and pick up the sandbag on his right. As he touches it, his mana starts pouring into it. He is able to lift it, but barely, as he struggles to hold it up. Kershel is satisfied with that and tells Kurt he can help out in wall repairs. Kurt's boss there isn't exactly pleased to see a scrawny boy like him being sent, but agrees to let him work anyways as they were short-handed. He tells Kurt to make cement and put it on the walls. He then leaves after giving Kurt 3 hours to empty at least half the barrel. Determined to do good work, Kurt begins. After 3 hours, his boss returns and gets stunned after finding 1/3 of the western walls repaired. He asks Kurt how he managed to get to the top of the walls without any scaffolds. Kurt casually explains he threw the cement and then rolled it using his makeshift roller. Flabbergasted but left with no choice but to believe the kid's words, he asks Kurt how long he planned to work there. Kurt ambitiously tells him for a week at least. He then gives Kurt his payment, and things start looking up for Kurt. However, just 3 days later, Kurt manages to finish repairing both the west and northern walls. Kurt's boss is forced to fire him because Kurt's excellent work was costing a lot of people their jobs. He tells Kurt the skills he demonstrated here were on par with SS or even SSS rank. Kurt gets his payment and becomes jobless again, clearly a case of suffering from success. Back at Hello Work for more work, Kurt is unable to find something on such short notice. That's when he notices a white-haired girl named Ulyssia arguing with one of the attendants over not being allowed to hire a miner since she was only willing to pay based on excavation success. Hearing this, Kurt offers to do this for her. Ulyssia wanted some brawny dwarf but took Kurt, considering him better than nothing. After Kurt leaves, Kershel gets notified about Kurt's bank transfer from the construction work. Seeing the whopping 200 gold coins payment sends Kershel into shock, and she slips over the sandbags from earlier. Her colleague mentions these weren't actually sandbags but mana measurers, which got heavier depending on the amount of mana a person had and would take someone on the level of a royal court mage to activate. This reminds Kershel of what happened with Kurt, leaving her wondering who exactly he was. Meanwhile, Kurt and Ulyssia reach their campsite. Ulyssia offers him some food she made. She tells him it wasn't much good, but to Kurt, who hadn't had home-cooked food let alone shared a meal with someone in some time, it was irresistible. Unable to share a tent with a lady, Kurt ends up spending the night outside. The next morning, Ulyssia and Kurt get ready to get to work. Kurt tells her mining randomly would waste time and requests her to let him look around first. After finding the right rock, Kurt breaks it, revealing crystals within. Within a short time, Kurt is able to mine a massive amount of crystals. Ulyssia says they should sell them now, but Kurt stops her. She thinks he was saying that because those were his to sell only, but Kurt actually wanted to turn them into magic crystals first to increase their value. While Ulyssia is left puzzled about how they would manage that, as only a dozen mages capable of doing something like that existed in the kingdom, Kurt is already done making one. She can't believe her eyes that he was able to make it that fast when even the best mages would normally take an hour at least, while Kurt, on the other hand, is impressed by how they could dispel mana for that long, completely unaware of his genius. Ulyssia then leaves Kurt to sell the crystals in the capital. Using a pendant representing the royal family, Ulyssia is able to teleport to the capital, although she no longer works for them anymore. She enters a trader's shop, where she initially gets offered 10 silver coins per crystal. But after the owner examines the crystal closely, she discovers they had been imbued with 10 times the mana found in other magic crystals, bringing their value to 10 gold coins per crystal. The owner gives Ulyssia an astounding 500 coins for 50 of them. However, she asks Ulyssia 2 favors in return: not to sell such strong magic crystals to any other shop, and to tell her who made these. Ulyssia tries keeping Kurt's identity a secret, at which the owner tells her it was in order since she was a loyal court mage. Ulyssia no longer served the loyal family, so she didn't need to listen to her. The owner then requests Ulyssia as a friend to at least not let Kurt slip away and tell him he could become a director at a royal magic technology research lab and even an honorary count if the king allows it. Trying to make sense of everything, Ulyssia heads to the Hello Work to learn more about Kurt. She forces Kershel there about information on Kurt. Kershel tells her about Kurt's completion of the northern and western wall repairs in just 3 days. She then hands Kershel Kurt's 499 gold coins and tells her to deposit them into his account and leaves after ordering her not to divulge any of this to anyone. Back at the campsite, Kurt stuns Ulyssia once again by building an entire wooden lodge overnight. Last time on the unaware 8-year Meister, Kurt, a young chore boy, gets kicked out of his party for being too useless. While searching for work, he meets Ulyssia, who is looking for someone to help her mine. Kurt's impressive 8-year skills help Ulyssia turn a huge profit in just one night, leading to her wondering who exactly this boy was. Stay tuned to see how Kurt's new journey unfolds as he discovers he's not so useless after all. Episode 2 starts off with the Flaming Dragon Fang party facing off against a monster tree. However, they have a hard time putting it on, and their new mage is especially of no help to them. Bandana, however, seems suspiciously happy seeing her party in shambles like this. Ulyssia tells Kurt about the job offer as the director of the Royal Magic Technology Research Lab and making him an honorary noble. Kurt is in disbelief that they would actually offer something like that to him. He felt like he shouldn't be working above people, and he also sort of wanted to return to Flaming Dragon Fang again. But most importantly, he wanted to finish his work with Ulyssia first. Ulyssia is touched by Kurt's unwavering kindness and humility. Kurt asks if she got to pay her taxes by selling the crystals. Ulyssia answers she was able to do that, and after taking her finder's fee, she deposited the rest in Kurt's account. Kurt tells her she didn't have to, but Ulyssia couldn't possibly have done that, as the guilt was already too much, and she was making a profit despite all the work being Kurt's. Ulyssia asks Kurt if he got enough rest yesterday, and Kurt happily replies he got 6 hours. The numbers don't seem to add up for Ulyssia, as Kurt had also built this cabin yesterday. while Kurt starts worrying if Ulysses thought 6 hours was too much rest time. Kurt then tells Ulysses that he found a promising place to mine yesterday, and the two set out to begin day 2 of mining. The two split up to dig in different spots. After a wild day of digging in one spot, Ulysses finally finds some topaz and gets excited about selling it after getting it turned into a magic crystal by Kurt. Ulysses then heads over to where Kurt was mining to check on his progress. She imagines he must have dug a whole tunnel by now. That actually turns out to be the case as well. As she walks through it, she notices the luminous glow of the tunnel, but also can't wrap her mind around the fact that he had dug such a huge tunnel, which was 3 times larger than what she had in mind. Kurt shows up, and Ulysses asks how his progress was going. Unfortunately, Kurt was not able to find much of the ore he was looking for and kept finding useless rocks. These useless rocks were mithril, an ore that sells for far more than gold or platinum, leaving Ulysses stunned. But apparently back in Kurt's hometown they weren't that valuable. Ulysses then asks what it was that Kurt was actually looking for. It was orichalcum, a legendary ore also known as the metal of the gods. Kurt casually tells Ulysses he found it by digging 7 kilometers into the mountain. Ulysses is blown away that Kurt was not only able to dig that deep in just 8 hours of time, but also filled it up during that time. Ulysses then notices the light of the setting sun entering through the other end of the tunnel. Yes, Kurt had actually dug a tunnel through a whole mountain as well. They finished mining after 2 days and returned to Samala town. He runs into Bandana there, who tells him she also got fired recently from Flaming Dragon Fang. Through a flashback we see Gulnova storming out of a restaurant and not paying for the food. He tells Bandana to go bring Kurt back so he could cook for them again. Gulnova was likely going to get arrested for his offense while Marlefus was currently called back to the church, so this marked the end of Flaming Dragon Fang. But Bandana didn't tell Kurt any of that because apparently she didn't want to bring any trouble to the person she was supposed to be surveying. Since Kurt was looking for work, she asks him if he would work for one of her friends who was among the 15 Aetlier Meisters with a permit in the country. Kurt wonders if he'll be any good, but Bandana reassures him he'll do great. Bandana gives Kurt directions to the Aetlier Meister's residence. An Aetlier was the service of producing and selling swords, medicines and magic items, and the one in charge of it all was the Aetlier Meister, who got granted special permission from the state. Kurt had no idea one such person was present in this small town. He arrives at the place and gives a knock. The door opens, and a tiny elf named Michelle Lalakata pops up from behind it. Kurt thinks she's the Aetlier Meister at first, but she clarifies that she was just her assistant. Kurt tells her he had come to assist in work, upon which Michelle takes him to the kitchen. A pigsty at this point, it hasn't been cleaned in weeks. However, Kurt fixes that in just 30 minutes. Once he's done, Kurt goes looking for Michelle to tell her about it, but can't seem to find her anymore. Then he enters a room where he finds a frail young girl with a curse mark on her stomach. Kurt examines it, and is at least relieved to know she still retained her appetite and so goes over to the kitchen again to prepare her something suitable. Meanwhile, Ulysses' friend Mimiko tells her the value of the mithril and orichalcum ores Kurt mined was around 50,000 gold. The two wonder where such a prodigy had come from and how he had been hidden all this time. Mimiko tells Ulysses that if news about his powers got out, Kurt would get abducted and, in the worst-case scenario, even get assassinated. Ulysses tells her she planned to make Kurt an Aetlier Meister and then have him hire her as a bodyguard, but the problem was with Kurt's low self-esteem. He didn't realize his own value and constantly undermined himself. As he's cooking, the real Aetlier Meister, Lady Ophelia, shows up. Kurt tells her he was making porridge for the cursed girl when Ophelia suddenly starts observing his face and asks him not to tell anyone about her. She gives him his payment, and Kurt leaves. Ophelia then goes to the cursed girl's room and finds her looking through her curtains. The cursed girl, whose name was Lies, smells the delightful aroma of Kurt's porridge and asks to have some of it. Ophelia wants to test it for poison first, but Lies stops her, saying she wanted to trust Kurt and felt like it would be okay. Unable to say no to such a precious request, Ophelia lets her eat the porridge. Lies finds its taste quite delectable and warm when suddenly she starts choking and collapses on the ground. Ophelia starts thinking Kurt poisoned her and rushes to get an antidote, but Lies is back on her feet the next second and is apparently all cured, as the curse had disappeared like it never existed. The culprits behind the curse find out right away that the curse had been broken and start devising new plans to assassinate Lies. Ophelia then went over to Mimico's shop, where Ulyssia was already present. She introduces them both to Lies, who was actually the third princess, Lady Lyslot. Ophelia tells them someone was after the princess's life. Lyslot, the only daughter of the king and Princess Francois of the Gurumaku Empire to the east of their empire, was like a symbol of peace between the two nations, and someone was trying to kill her to destroy this peace. Mimico readily agrees to help the princess identify the curse caster, but is surprised that she was able to break such a powerful curse. The princess joyfully tells her it was possible thanks to a boy named Kurt, shocking the two once again when they thought they had seen everything. Episode 3 begins with Ulyssia grabbing her head over Kurt's adventures in just one day, as he had now helped save a princess's life. On the other hand, on the basis of having the ability to access a curse user capable of tampering with wards against curses in the royal palace, Mimico brings forth 3 suspects. The first one was Sinova Ristkatz, the first general of the Royal Expeditionary Forces. Second was Tristan Maynolf, bishop of the Poland Church. And third was Isidora Arkmama, the third queen of the king. Although the problem was that all 3 of them had ways to have done this, and it was hard to determine the real culprit at this point. So Ophelia proposes to lure the culprit instead. Lies had just turned 15 recently, and custom demanded that she go train at an 8-leer for a year. Ophelia suggests they establish a fake 8-leer run by an 8-leer master of their choice, who didn't really exist, so when the culprit tries to gather information on them, they will be captured. But even for this, they needed a big achievement to make someone an 8-leer master, upon which Ulyssia shows Ophelia a magic crystal Kurt had made. Ophelia is blown away by Kurt's skill. It's the next day now. Kurt goes back to Ophelia's home, but she had been out since yesterday, Michelle informs him. Wondering if it had anything to do with him, Kurt goes over to the nearest diner for some breakfast. While he enjoys his meal, Kurt can't help overhearing another party arguing over whether or not they should take a job without a porter in their team. Availing this opportunity, Kurt goes over to them and tells them he wasn't good in battle, but could do a porter job as well as any other. The girl among the trio straight up makes up for Kurt's small physique, while the other member tells Kurt that he is indeed too weak to go on such a dangerous mission, especially because their goal was to hunt iron golems that weigh over 200 kilograms. Kurt says that was very easy to do as he picks up both the guys in the party with ease, even though the one in the armor was almost 200 kilograms by himself. The big guy was Kanz. He was the brawn of their party. Danzo was a samurai and also the party leader, while the girl was Sina, who was a ranger. The 3 then welcome Kurt to their party and thank him for helping them out like this. As they are venturing to their destination, Kurt gets attacked by a slime and starts stabbing it in a panic. During his desperation, he ends up stabbing himself in the leg as well when Sina grabs his knife and kills the slime. Kurt's claim that he was bad at combat was starting to make sense, but Kanz reassured him by saying he just needed to haul the goods for them. Seeing such a positive reaction to his mistake for once brings tears to Kurt's eyes, as he never experienced such warmth back in Flaming Dragon Fang. The group then continues their journey and finally reaches the tunnel. Sina blows some luminous moss to illuminate the whole cave. Inside it, Kurt finds some strange stuff, which Sina identifies as goblin poop. And it was fresh too, which meant those monsters were still here. Suddenly, one shows up. But some quick action from Sina and Danzo takes care of him right away. Although the rest of the goblins get alerted too, and they start coming in from all directions. Kanz and Danzo plan to stand and fight, but Kurt finds a hidden door. Sina goes behind him but suddenly closes the door with just him and her on the other side. Kurt asks her what she was doing, and she replies, this was the only way someone would be able to escape. They try holding the goblins off till Kurt and Sina can get out. Seeing their valor brings tears to Kurt's eyes when suddenly Sina stumbles across a giant monster. It was an iron golem dragon. Meanwhile, Princess Lyslot and Ulyssia arrive at the inn Kurt was staying at. Both decide to call each other Lies and Yuli to keep their identities hidden. They don't find Kurt in his room, however, and start wondering where he could possibly be when, out of the blue, Bandana appears outside Kurt's room and lets them know that Kurt was currently at the caves to the east-northeast accompanying the adventuring party Sakura. Ulyssia rushed out to see who this voice belonged to, but Bandana had already vanished by then. Ulyssia wonders if this was a trap, but at the same time she knew that those caves were known to be crawling with goblins, and things could get tricky. so she tells Lies to stay behind while she goes and has a look. Lies, however, insists on going with her. She turns Ulysses' guard duty back on her by saying, how could she leave the person she was supposed to protect unprotected? Furthermore, being a royal, she had been taught enough magic to protect herself. Ulysses finally agrees, and so the two head out for the caves. Once there, Lies recognizes Kurt's footprints and starts following his trail, leaving Ulysses wondering how exactly she managed to memorize those so well. The footprints become hard to see beyond a point, so Lies activates her long sense ability, which enhances senses. Ulysses thinks she'll enhance her hearing and look for Kurt by following his voice. But no, the sense Lies enhanced was of smell as she starts sniffing all around the cave like a bloodhound. Lies finds people at a bend in the cave. It was Cans and Danzo battling the endless gobs of goblins. Ulysses tells Lies to stay put while she takes care of this. Using her buff skill, Lies enhances Ulysses' power, and she's able to slice through all her foes in one motion. On the other side of the secret door, Sina falls to her knees in fear of the monstrosity in front of her. She starts regretting being so adamant about taking this quest, even apologizing to Kurt for dragging him into this, as escape didn't seem possible. Iron Golem's job was to stop intruders from passing, and would definitely attack them if they tried going past them. Kurt puts his hand on Sina's shoulder and tells her not to worry. He then heads over to the golems. It attacks and Sina screams, but amazingly, Kurt is able to evade it and hops on top. He then thrusts his sword into its tail, dismantling it like a Jenga tower. Kurt continues to break apart the iron golems like it was child's play as Sina looks on in disbelief. Kurt tells Sina he was used to mining iron golems, leaving her at a loss for words. Suddenly, Ulysses bursts through the hidden door, looking for Kurt. Kurt immediately rushes over to her and tells her to help Cans and Danzo, but Ulysses reassures him they were fine. A little injured, but nothing to worry about. Seeing what happened here, Ulysses starts thinking about the legend of a man who was G rank in combat, but S rank in harvesting, succeeding in slaying a briar dragon with just a sickle. Ulysses wonders if something with Kurt could be something like that. Cans tells Ulysses they weren't aware of such a large horde of goblins still being here and thanks Ulysses for her help. Ulysses then tells Kurt about joining a new 8-layer and asks him to join as well. She also asks Cans and Danzo to join, as they needed all the help they could get. Cans and Danzo readily accept this offer, and as they're heading back, Ulysses asks Kurt to take his aptitude test again. Mimiko is the one to take his test. While he celebrates joining an 8-layer with Cans and the others, Mimiko tells Ulysses Kurt's results. She had told him he scored a B rank in cooking, mining and cleaning and a C in everything else. Although in reality, Kurt was an SSS rank, and his latent magic power was even greater than Mimiko's. Kerschel overhears this top-secret discussion and starts panicking, thinking she wasn't supposed to. Mimiko and Ulysses then proceed to tease her by scaring the life out of her. Kurt's excitement knows no bounds as he travels in a carriage for the first time. They were heading to Frontier Town, a former military base that bordered the demon's land. As Ulysses struggles to not blurt out that Kurt himself was going to be the 8-layer Meister, Sina suspects they were being taken there to be silenced forever and starts thinking up some strategies in her mind. As they enter the town, Kurt tells them about how he got fired from there after just 3 days. Although he notices not much work had been done since he left, which, of course, was expected because not everyone can do months of work in 3 days like him. They stop at a large empty lot that Ulysses calls their new 8-layer. The 8-layer was yet to be built, and Ulysses handed that responsibility to Kurt. Kurt finally seems normal when he says he couldn't build the entire 8-layer in a day. But he could get it done in 3 days, never mind. He lists some items he needed and asks Ulysses to get them for him, while Sina contemplates what kind of torture they could inflict with a griffin feather. They wish Kurt good luck on his project and all head over to the nearest inn. Unable to keep it in, Sina reveals to Cans and Danzo that Kurt had defeated the iron golems back at the cave, and that too with a single knife. Sina asks them who Kurt exactly was and their real identities too. So Ulysses tells them she was an adventurer who previously served the royal family, while Lies was actually the third princess of the kingdom, Hamiro's Lyslot. But since she was currently hiding her true identity, she asked them to continue calling her Lies. Sina asks if Kurt was royalty too, but Ulysses had as much of a clue about who Kurt was as a dad who had just been asked how old his own biological child is. Ulysses tells them that while Kurt got a G rank on all things concerning combat, He had scores of SSS in mining and transportation, which put him among elites. But they hadn't told Kurt that, and instead told him he was B and C rank in these. Moreover, Kurt was also the 8-Leer Meister of this 8-Leer, which too he had no idea about. Sina speaks up against them for keeping Kurt in the dark, to which Ulycia replies it was only because he wouldn't believe them, and to protect his identity, they were keeping all of this a secret so that no evildoers get lured in. Sina snaps at Ulycia and lies and declares them evil for exploiting Kurt when Cans finally calms his little chihuahua-esque sister down. Lies then tells them about how Kurt had removed her curse despite not knowing she was royalty. Because of his polite nature, they wanted to protect him and requested all three of them to also keep quiet about this. Danzo unsheathes his sword a little and sheaths it back up to build a cool setup before he agrees to keep all this a secret.
Nice.
Cans was of the same opinion too. Sina, however, was still not convinced, so she goes outside to where Kurt was to tell him the truth. In the span of an hour, Kurt had already dug up the entire lot and laid the foundation for the 8-Leer. After Sina expresses her shock at this, Kurt boasts he was B rank after all, totally unaware that no B rank could even dream of accomplishing this. Sina asks Kurt if the sudden dumping of work on him was troubling him. But to Kurt, who had always felt useless at his former party, this was quite a refreshing feeling, as it made him finally feel useful. His cheerful uppity attitude about it makes Sina agree with Ulycia's sentiment that Kurt was a national treasure and should be protected at all costs. Meanwhile, Danzo finds out that Bibinak, Aka Thousand Face, and the fourth party member of Sakura was actually trying to sabotage their party after reportedly being paid by an enemy of theirs. The informant was none other than Bandana. Later that day, Danzo gets the greedy Danzo to blurt out his real intentions and how he was planning to hit the jackpot by ruining Sakura, who was rumored to have ties with the third princess. Bibinak makes a run for it as soon as he sees Danza, but gets tripped by a mystery helper. Danzo walks up to Bibinak and prepares to swing his sword, only to stop it right next to his cheek. Danzo then warns him never to show his ugly muck near his party again and walks away, as Danzo lies there like a dead cockroach. The mystery helper was Bandana, who tries to finish Bibinak off, but he suddenly gets picked up by people from Phantom, the intelligence unit under the third-ranking royal court mage Mimiko. She then receives news about Marlefus, but right now her priority, according to her master's orders, was to get to Kurt's hometown. 3 days pass, and the 8-Leer is finished. Kurt welcomes them all and gives them a tour. Everything was, in every way, too crazy to be real. Kurt had even managed to build perpetual motion engines that generate water. All the guest rooms were comparable to ultra-luxury suites. While giving them a tour of the 8-Leer Meister's room, Kurt asks when the 8-Leer Meister will actually arrive. Ulycia tells him he had stomach issues, so he'll be a little late. After learning Kurt was thinking about sleeping in the kitchen, everyone insisted he sleep in the 8-Leer Meister's room till he showed up, and after only 2 hours of convincing, Kurt finally agreed. Ulycia then places curse-warding talismans all over the place, and especially outside Liza's room. The next morning, as they're all enjoying the delicious breakfast Kurt made for them, Ulycia notices Kurt's absence, only to find out he had gone to wipe off some strange scrawlings all over the mansion. Ulycia realizes what he was trying to do and dashes to him. Although these talismans weren't supposed to go away once placed, Kurt casually wipes them off with his rag like a common stain. Ulycia manages to trick Kurt into thinking this was the doing of the Scrawlinky the Scrawler, but she now needs to think of another way to protect Lies and quickly. Bishop Tristan excommunicates Marlefus from the Poland church due to the unruly manner in which her party was behaving. She tries justifying releasing a lightning spell in the restaurant because they had served her bad food, but even that is not enough to convince Tristan. But since Marlefus was an exemplary mage, he decides to give her one more chance and even the opportunity to become a priestess. He pours her a glass of wine that he had received from an enemy empire as a gift. With more gold in his mouth than the Bank of London, Tristan orders Marlefus to assist him in killing the third princess, Lyslot. Suddenly, a curse mark appears around her stomach, and she drops to her knees. She had been poisoned with a curse that prevented its victim from consuming anything but water. So Marlefus had to either obey Tristan or starve to death. She, of course, picks the former, and we see her lying on the magic circle where she sees the demon lord. Now that Mimiko had arrived in town, a web had been spread around the entire place which would let them know of any suspicious activity. While enjoying yet another one of Kurt's culinary delights, Lies jokes about wanting porridge in case she got cursed again. But Kurt reassures her that won't be happening. Kurt had actually set up a magical barrier against curses around the whole 8-layer mansion. If anyone tried to curse them, he'd end up glowing like a light bulb since Kurt didn't want to curse them back. Ulyssia decides to report all this to Mimiko. Kurt asks Lies if she'd like to accompany him to the market, since she hadn't been outside ever since coming here, but Lies has to tell him no, even though it pains her more than anything to refuse Kurt. While General Allraid and his right-hand man, Generic, discuss the integrity of the town's walls against a possible monster assault, Mimiko and the rest go over to inspect the curse user. After being lit up like a Christmas tree because of Kurt's barrier, the assailant got killed by his enemies, who feared he'd get them caught, but even after dying, he continued to glow. Mimiko tells them she'll look into this while Ulyssia makes sure Kurt and Lies stay within the mansion. Suddenly, the alarms start sounding. It was a giant horde of skeletons heading straight for the city. But before they can even be intercepted, they start advancing towards the western walls all of a sudden and start disappearing. Meanwhile, the Demon Lord uses Marlefus as a battery to continue bringing forth his undead warriors using her mana. Bishop Tristan had formed a pact with the Demon Lord to kill the princess and was planning to use Marlefus as fodder for his plan. The next day arrives, and Ulyssia discusses what was going on with Kurt and Lies. Upon hearing the walls he built were purifying the monsters, Kurt simply remarks that it was very common for walls to do that back in his hometown. But the south and east walls, which Kurt didn't assist with, had no purifying power, and that was a cause of concern. Ulyssia manages to keep Kurt at bay by asking him to protect the princess from the Scrawlinky. Over at the south and east walls, the monster numbers kept growing. Ulyssia and the others meet up with General Allraid and Vice General Generic to discuss the current situation. Ulyssia asks Allraid to act as a decoy with his men while she heads over to the west to the monster's source, the Lapita ruins, and nips the problem in the bud. Ophelia reassures the general that they were more than capable of handling themselves by showing him one of the magic crystals Kurt had made. Allraid agrees, but only on the condition that he be allowed to join Ulyssia in the assault team. Generic opposed this immediately, but it was the most effective way, and Allraid's strength was beneficial for it. Generic then hands Allraid a cup of water instead of liquor, and the two of them then pour it on the floor as they make the manly man vow to not let this be the last time they are parting from each other. Kurt decides to forge a mini version of Danzo's blade. Even though things were different compared to his time at the Flaming Dragon Fang, he still was yet to be of any use at all in combat. On the other hand, just one of the magic crystals that Kurt had created was able to purify the entirety of skeletons and demons that were attacking a part of the town, leaving everyone in absolute awe of the new 8-layer Meister's capabilities. The same 8-layer Meister, however, wasn't feeling very proud at that moment as he looked at the finished sword he had just forged. Lies shows up and starts praising the sword, so Kurt decides to gift it to her but warns her about it setting off a spell if raised over the head. Kurt finally asks Lies if someone was after her. Lies comes clean and tells him whoever they were. They were currently operating in the west, where Ulyssia had gone to clean, or so she told Kurt. From a past experience with his former party, Kurt comes to the conclusion that the west was the best spot for scrawling, and Ulyssia most likely went there to stop the Scrawlinky Scrawler. Finding himself of no use once again, Kurt breaks down in frustration that he couldn't protect the people precious to him. Ulyssia tells him she felt the same way, so Kurt suddenly gets a burst of motivation and tells Ulyssia they'll go help too. The town was currently being attacked from 8 directions, so Kurt suggested they take the 9th way and head to the west. At the west, on the other hand, Ulyssia and Allraid were currently busy fending off the monsters when Ulyssia suddenly got a chill down her spine. After getting into her battle-appropriate outfit, Princess Lies gets tempted to check the spell for herself, so she starts swinging the sword over her head like a magic wand, but nothing happens. As she's about to head over to Kurt, someone shows up at her room. At the west of the city, the monsters start to overwhelm Ulyssia and Allraid. Allraid gets injured, and they were running out of magic crystals too. With the situation looking its worst, Hope arrives in the form of the Sakura party. Cans and Danzo immediately spring into action to help while Sina provides backup. They use this opportunity to advance to the ruins. Ulyssia hands Allraid a simple vegetable soup for his injuries, which suddenly starts healing him. She forgot to mention it was Kurt's work too. Team Sakura holds off the monsters at the entrance of the ruins, which gives Ulyssia and Allraid the chance to get inside. They sprint through the ruins, slicing monsters up like onions while the Demon Lord continues to drain more and more power from Marlefus. He spots Ulysses and Allraid on one of the demonic surveillance screens and decides to go over there to say hello. After finally finding the source, Ulysses uses a magic crystal to destroy it. As she's wondering if it worked or not, the demon lord pops up behind them. Realizing she was up against the final boss needed to clear this level, she uses a magic crystal right in front of the demon lord, but shockingly, it had no effect on him. He tells Ulysses her fancy flash bombs won't have any effect on him because he has infinite health. Allraid calls his bluff by charging at him with his sword and slicing him across the gut. It doesn't do him any harm, however, and he heals up instantly. The demon lord, who was now extracting even more energy from Marlefus, planned to summon even more monsters so he could trample Sakura, then Generic and his knights. Allraid and Ulysses launch a coordinated attack on the demon lord, decapitating and slicing his heart simultaneously. The demon lord simply plops his head back on like a Lego piece and starts messing with Ulysses' head by telling her he'll rip the princess apart. Back in the basement, as Marlefus says her final goodbyes to the world, Kurt tunnels out in front of her alongside Lies. Marlefus starts thinking Kurt had figured everything out and brought the princess here to make her repent for her mistakes. When Kurt introduces her to Lies as Sister Marlefus, she tells him she had been excommunicated from the church. She starts explaining what was going on and how Bishop Tristan was behind all this, but Kurt had his own theory bouncing around in his head. He concludes that Marlefus was venting her frustration at the church by scrawling all over the city and especially the princess's room. Scrawlinky the Scrawler was actually Marlefus all along, or so Kurt was thinking, confusing the heck out of Marlefus. Lies then tells Kurt she was going over to where Ulysses was. Kurt asks to accompany her, but Lies reassures him that she'll be fine since she has his sword with her, plus someone has to stay back and watch over the Scrawlinky. Marlefus couldn't believe Kurt was allowing the princess to actually go to her death without a worry. Kurt then grabs a mop to clean the magical circle that he thought was another scrawling. Marlefus thinks he had lost his mind but ends up eating her words when Kurt mops the magic circle like nothing. Simultaneously, the demon lord suddenly dodges an attack from Ulysses and Allraid, and they both notice it right away. That's when Lies shows up. The demon lord, for whom it was like a chicken showing up at a KFC, quickly, without wasting any time, attacks Lies and drops her. Ulysses looks on in shock as the demon lord bursts out in laughter over his contract now being completed. Here to spoil his glory was Lies, as she pops up from behind all of them. Thanks to the spell attached to Lies' sword, Butterfly, Lies was able to create a clone with the same scent, face, and even body heat as hers. The demon lord strikes her again, only for it to be yet another illusion. Lies then pops up next to a magic crystal and uses it. This time the demon lord's life was not so infinite as he vanished alongside his undead army. Ulysses starts scolding Lies, but in reality she was just so worried she had lost her. Marlefus's stomach was still growling louder than most lions, so Kurt offered her some rice balls. Expecting to vomit right after eating, Marlefus still takes a bite out of it in order to enjoy the taste of Kurt's fine cooking one last time. She notices she isn't feeling nauseous after eating, and her curse disappears as well out of the blue. It was Kurt's powers. She finally realizes that they had all been protected all this time thanks to Kurt's kindness, which they had taken for granted. But Marlefus finally repents and apologizes to Kurt for everything. Kurt was chill because all the scrawlings were gone, but the Phantom showed up out of the blue and arrested Marlefus. Kurt calls out to her. Marlefus starts hoping he'll defend her, but he was just letting her know he'll bring her favorite grape bread in jail when he comes to visit. Having finally found some friends to depend on and a home to go back to, Kurt was happier than ever. Although his happiness turns into anxiety when no one seems to be saying a word about the dinner he prepared. Apparently they were all so hypnotized by the extravagant taste that they forgot to express any satisfaction verbally. Kurt then sets off some fireworks to celebrate their victory while Generic and Allraid's wounds suddenly start healing. Kurt tells them it was commonplace for injuries to heal after a good meal, which the two military men quickly challenge. Elsewhere, Margrave Takon goes to visit a girl bound in chains against a magic circle. In a flashback from 10 years back, we see a young Kurt running into the same chained-up girl. He introduces himself and tries making small talk, but she ignores him like he was invisible, making young Kurt almost bawl out in tears. Her name was Hildegard, and her father, a merchant, had told her not to talk to people from Haste Village. But she found a loophole by talking to Kurt, but saying "I'm talking to myself" at the end of every sentence. The two get along very well and go to see the multicolored flower on Kurt's pet golem. Hildegard spots some berries and tosses them in her mouth, but they turn out to be poisonous. Not wasting a second, 5-year-old Kurt gets to work to save her life. This all turns out to be a dream as Ulyssia wakes Kurt up. The village they had arrived at was facing an issue of severe drought. The neighbors had a large reservoir but refused to share. Ulyssia returns to only find Danzo. Everyone else was at the top of the hill, helping out a farmer with a strained back to tend to his birds. Ulyssia heads to the neighboring village to try and negotiate with them, but it turns out their reserves had almost run out too. Suddenly, 2 men come rushing to inform about something at the hilltop. Ulyssia heads over there to investigate and finds an enormous body of water there. Cans and Sina tell her it wasn't there until just a few moments ago, at which point Kurt's voice is heard from a distance, which explains everything. Apparently the waterfowl were quite thirsty, so Kurt drew some water up from the aquifer. The village people, thinking it was Ulyssia's work, start thanking her profusely while bonehead Kurt also stands there impressed by how quickly she solved their issue. As a reward, they receive a bunch of colorful eggs. Meanwhile, Lies goes over to see Margrave Takon to report about the recent incident. As Lies enjoyed the meal presented to her by the Lord, in her mind she was well aware he was only trying to win her over in order to further solidify his authority. Margrave asks Lies about the special magic crystals with the ability to purify anything within a 500-meter radius. Lies already knew he was trying to get information on Kurt, so she pretends that the crystals were no way near that powerful. Margrave's next move, however, is quite powerful as he tells Lies he was thinking about appointing the Aetlier Meister as the viceroy of this city. This completely catches Lies off guard, and in a desperate attempt to refuse him because Kurt would need to make public appearances if he became viceroy, she tells him she couldn't make such a decision all by herself. But the shrewd lord tells her she had all the authority for it since she came here to represent the Aetlier Meister. As Kurt had also saved the lives of countless soldiers during the monster incident, Margrave was confident the soldiers would back him too. Lies was confident that Allraid would be on the same line as her and oppose this plan, but Allraid was more thrilled than anyone to make this happen. Margrave then asks Lies if the Aetlier Meister was perhaps incompetent to take on this role, which immediately snaps something inside Lies as she starts declaring no one is better for the job than their Aetlier Meister, putting the final nail in the coffin. She then reports about her huge blunder to Ulyssia, who definitely didn't need another stress in her life. Lies asks about Kurt's whereabouts. One of the eggs was fertilized and close to hatching, so Kurt was currently tending to it. Going off their experiences with Kurt, Ulyssia jokes the bird from it will probably lay gold eggs. Around the same time, Mimiko receives news that Bishop Tristan had been assassinated. Someone else from the church was found dead and had their soul sold off. She had gotten the news that Kurt was going to become their new viceroy, and wasn't too thrilled about it either when some even crazier news dropped in. The egg had finally hatched, and what came from within was Kurt's daughter. The egg, which supposedly belonged to a waterfowl, hatched into a 3-year-old girl that looked identical to Kurt. Ulyssia tells him this was a monster trying to deceive him and takes it away from him. She planned to dispatch it right away, but after it called her mama once, she had already imagined her life together with Kurt, raising her as their daughter. Ulyssia gets caught lacking, and Lies snatches it from her. It takes her out by calling her mama too, followed by Sina, who gets called sis. Cans then volunteers to raise her in Sakura, and Ulyssia is finally willing to allow it. When it's time to name her, all sorts of pseudo-names with Kurt, Ulyssia and Liza's initials are suggested until Kurt comes up with the name Akuri, meaning area, since she had brought all 3 of them closer. For once, they all agree, and Akuri is welcomed into the family. During the night, Ulyssia sends a sample of Akuri's hair and saliva to Mimiko to verify her true identity. In the meantime, she had Kurt build Akuri a fancy child room that was, in a way, a type of prison since no one could break out of there. She also limited her interaction with Kurt and cut off all contact of Akuri with Lies until she gets back the results. Ulyssia and Kurt then leave Akuri in Sina's care to go on a mission. Suddenly, they hear a child's voice while on their way. They stop the carriage and find Akuri inside it. Somehow she had flown out of the unbreakable room. One of the agents from Phantom arrives and changes disguises. Ulyssia goes over to talk to her under the excuse she might be from a frontier town and could deliver her message. Kurt starts feeling bad for Ulyssia as they were raising Akuri at his request. Ulyssia returns and tells Kurt neither of them were wrong about what they were thinking, but they should put effort in right now so she'll turn out good. Out of nowhere, an old man with a staff pops up, calls Kurt a traveling hero and Ulyssia his retainer. and tells them they need to defeat the Demon Lord and save the world. Kurt and Akiri get into it immediately while Ulysses is flabbergasted as to what is even happening right now.